your home for end-to-end coverage of the New York Rangers. With your hosts, Brendan Azoff, Zach Domino, and Steve Pappas. Blue Shirts fans, the puck drops now.
All right, if you had 3 words to describe mine and Zook's last 2 days of being a sports fan, I think, oh my God, might be the perfect way to describe it. Not only did the Mets advance to the NLCS, but the New York Rangers starting their season with one of the best first games we have ever seen in a 6-0 dominating performance against the Pittsburgh Penguins on Wednesday night in Pittsburgh. Let's just start with some pleasantries. Zook, how you doing? I know it's been a crazy last couple days. We're just trying to enjoy the ride at this moment.
It's a lot of fun. I think Brendan knew to maybe take the night off because there'd possibly be some Mets-Rangers crossover, and he wanted to give us some time. But yeah, just to touch off the Mets, what a great win. Can't believe he went with Diaz in the 9th. It's the playoffs, and he should have kept in Peterson because Peterson was hot. But that's a conversation for a different show. But yeah, I mean, with the Rangers, it's really the only type of win or style of win or type of game that they could play that would have gotten me excited. A normal win wouldn't have pumped me up too much. A 2-1, 3-1 win where we scored nothing 5-on-5 and just beat a team that we were better than because the Penguins just absolutely suck. We'll get into that later in the show. But that wouldn't have got me going because it's the theme of me and Brendan talked about it last week. We've all talked about it for a few weeks now. The Rangers were very much in a wait-and-see mode. They didn't do much to improve their team, that they're banking on these guys that as fans, I'm okay with it, but you better get at least to where you were last year, which is the Eastern Conference Finals. And better yet, you probably got to win a cup. But, you know, as the Rangers tend to do, they zig when everyone zags or zags when everyone zigs, and they come out and put up one of their best 5-on-5 performances that we've literally seen in years. Literally in years. It was all 4 lines. It was all 12 forwards. It was all 6 defensemen. It was obviously the man in between the pipes as well, but an unbelievable performance. Just literally down the entire roster where, you know, if they play 82 games like that, they'll have no problem then winning another 16 in the playoffs. But I know we started with the Mets, and me and you may have not been too, you know, ingrained in this game for the first period, but we went back and watched it. And we obviously watched the rest of the game after that. There's really not much to say about their performance other than it was an ass-kicking where the Rangers really played their A-plus game. And that's what this team looks like when they play that style. They're a good team with the best goalie in between the pipes. And if everything's clicking on all cylinders, they're literally going to win games 6-0 against bad teams.
Yeah, I remember last year when they opened up against Buffalo in Buffalo. They go in, they win 5-1. Kreider has 2 goals in that game as well. And I was sitting there like, is that one of the best season opening games that I've ever watched? And to come back a year later and to top that, because not only do you win this game 6-0, you're outshot 10-3 in the first 10 minutes or so in this game. And then you dominate for the next 50 minutes of the game, completely and utterly blow the Pittsburgh Penguins out of the water. Are the Penguins a great team? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. They can still sneak into the playoffs. Like we've talked about, this Metropolitan Division is so bad top to bottom. Like the top is good. The rest of it is so bad to average that this could be a playoff team. And we saw it with Washington last year. But very rarely last season, and it might just be recency bias because the last couple games that they played against Florida, they were getting their show run. The last couple of games against Carolina, they were getting their show run at 5-on-5, but it felt like the Rangers were controlling the play of the game and were in control in this game from start to finish outside of maybe the first 10 minutes of the game. And also, there's not enough that can be said about Igor Shesterkin with, you know, the Kevin Weeks report coming out the day before the season starts that he turned down a, what was it, 8-year, $80 million or
I think it was 8 for 88, yeah, which put him right at 11.
Which would have made him 11, which, let's not kid ourselves here. I've had this conversation with a couple people that are sitting here, oh, we're really gonna argue over $600,000, $700,000 here. This is the guy that has been your playoff MVP for the 2 runs that you've had. This is your guy that has been your season MVP for the 2-3+ years that they've been competitive. You don't win games without Igor Shesterkin. You don't win a President's Trophy without Igor Shesterkin. You don't do 85% of the things that this team has done over the last 3 years without him in the net. And if it means that he needs to be the highest paid player in the organization, then so be it. That's what it has to be. This 11-6, 11-7-5, 11-8 number, whatever keeps getting thrown out here, is not like something that came out of the blue where Shesterkin's camp was like, that's a big number. We want that number. Like, there's so much math that's involved in here. And I'll say it until I'm blue in the face, right? Like, this is not a contract that you're going to look at next year. And you're not going to evaluate his contract next year or even the year after. This is a contract that 4, 5, 6 years into an 8-year deal, you're going to be like, we have a steal and goal at $11.75 million over the next 8 years because the cap has gone up to $102, $103 million, $120 million even, hopefully by the end of this, contract life cycle. But for him, after all of that, to then come out, keep the team in the game for the first 10 minutes yesterday, and then be able to close the door the rest of the game, not give up a goal. First shutout in a season opener since 1953 in Gump Worsley. I mean, I don't think any of us we weren't alive for that. We remember old Gump that was playing in 1953. But, it was just a game that I look at, and you're not going to remember this. You're not going to remember this game in March and April and May. This is not going to be one that you're like, that was a huge win, this and that. But it's a great way to start the season, knowing you have a team that can make the conference final, make a Stanley Cup final, win a Stanley Cup this year, and you steamroll through a bad team.
Yeah, and it's funny because there's two kind of things that if we don't want to be overly positive about the game that we can point to, and from the player standpoint, and on the ice, it's just funny because like the parts that overlapped with the Mets game, which was mostly that first 10 minutes, I was sitting there watching both, like saying to my wife, who was just watching the Mets because they were on the big screen and I was watching the Rangers on my laptop, the Rangers are just Rangering. We scored a goal off a deflection and the Penguins were dominating the play and Igor was making the saves that we see them make so much. And I'm like, oh, it's good that the Rangers are back where they're going to win games that they probably get outplayed and Igor is going to save them. But then, like you said, the last 10 minutes of that first period, specifically the last 5, and then the second period through the third period, it was just a total ass kicking. And then the other negative and it's not really a negative, but that can be taken out of this game, and it's more from the fan base. Both sides feel correct coming out of this, which is bad for war. The anti-Igor, and not anti-Igor, anti-pay Igor, whatever he wants team is saying, we don't need a shutout if we're scoring 6. We can have a goalie that can give up 4 or 5. And the pro-Igor people are saying, we don't need to build a team that could score 6 every night. If we're getting that type of play in net, we just need 1 or 2. So whatever your thought process was about paying Igor going into that game, you probably feel better about yourself coming out of it, which, watching this unfold is just funny because it's Igor with the shutout is probably thinking to himself that he's worth every penny and he's happy he didn't take it. And people who don't want to pay him are saying, hey, constructing a team where you get 5 or 6 goals a night and play 5-on-5 like that, you don't need a guy that stands on his head. But look, me and you have been very open about the fact that we're much more on the pay Igor whatever he wants side. Obviously, we don't want to pay him 20, 25, but in my deepest, darkest thoughts at night, if you told me it was lose him or pay him $20 million, I'd probably pay him $20 million. But man, he's not a guy that we're ever going to point to during the contract and be like, that's the reason why we lost. But let's break down the other contracts. Let's talk about the fact that Panarin was making 11.7 and disappeared for parts over the playoffs. Let's talk about all the other guys that disappeared during parts of the playoffs, and not the one guy who has shown that he's the best in the world at the most important position during the playoffs. And you can say what you want. Look at the stats. Yeah, it's about the goalie getting hot, blah, blah, blah. It's a shame the Rangers haven't won a Stanley Cup with the way that Igor has played in the playoffs. He's otherworldly, and it's a big enough sample size at this point that that's just who that dude is in the playoffs. And if you can't pay him, let's just do a round number, $12 million with the growing cap, and construct a team around him that can get to the Stanley Cup Finals and have a floor of the Eastern Conference Finals over the course of his contract, that's a Chris Drury problem. That's a Rangers problem. That's not an Igor Shesterkin problem. And I'm fine with him not accepting that deal and going after what he thinks he's worth, because he's worth it. And we can find it in other places. And I'll die on that hill throughout the whole season that Igor Shesterkin will be worth every single penny that this team ultimately ends up giving him. And I think we also both agree with the fact that this deal is going to get done. I had Devils fans like reaching out to me, like laughing at me, like, oh, haha, Igor, blah, blah, blah. This leak, there's no bad blood between these two. This isn't something that isn't going to get done. I think they talked about a few other deals in the past that have gotten, this has happened right before the season and then in the middle of the season or towards the end that have gotten done. This was a leak by one side to get out where the numbers are, starting at. But I don't think both sides are even far off. I think what we've heard is you said the 11.7, 11.8. He may just want more than Panarin, which again, we're talking 6, 7, 800,000 that the Rangers are eventually going to give it to him. And we're both fine with that.
Let's argue the fact here that he's looking to be the highest paid Ranger on the roster. Why does he not deserve that? Give me a reason why he doesn't deserve to be
and he needs to be the guy. And I'm not the biggest hockey historian. You and Brendan are much more historians about the game than I am. But I was reading, there was this divide between defense and forwards, and there still kind of is. But back in the day, there was a huge divide, like how we see between goalies and skaters now. They just didn't pay defensemen. And there were some high-end defensemen that were actually part of the reason that they kept that line. And it finally took one or two to, have mini holdouts and break that. But look, Igor could do this, and then other teams could follow. And we may look in a few years where goalies are just paid as forwards. And as you've said a million times, and I've echoed, it could ultimately be a contract where we look in 3 and 4 years and we're laughing because he's making 12. And yeah, we've seen some other goalies what they're making. But once that first one gets set, that kind of anchors down a price. And in 3 or 4 years, there may be goalies that make more or close to Igor that he's just twice as good at, three times as good at. And you literally cannot put a price on how having a goalie that performs literally every single playoffs. Because the reason why any goalie can get hot works is because most goalies aren't hot automatically during the playoffs. He's automatic, so that just is the other side of anybody can get hot. He's the one guy in the league that you can really count on.
I think what's lost also in last night, and we can talk about the game specifically right now, is the fact that Jacob Trouba, after all the offseason,
was he hurt? Was he actually hurt?
Ranger fans, including myself, and I'm sure all of us, have sat here and said, for the greater good, he cannot be a Ranger at the end of this season. And I'm sure that's what's going to happen when we get to July of next year, but we are in October. Yep. He's still on the New York Rangers roster, and he was arguably the best Ranger on the ice last night, had a really good preseason. And, when he said that this is the last ride, I'd be interested to see what last ride Trouba is like with this team. If he's going to start pinching in offensively a little bit more, I doubt it. He said it after the game. It was really funny talking with the TNT crew. They mentioned he was going to go and I saw that. and rival Adam Fox for the points. And he said, that's not part of my game, and just kind of laughed and shrugged it off. But, if they can get, let's set Trouba's average here. If they can get an above average Trouba for the whole season, this decor gets a lot scarier, and a decor that we thought, was a little light. And now they have Victor Mancini, who, I'm not going to go right home about him. It's a great story and all, but he's not going to make or break your blue line, especially with Keandre Miller and when Ryan Lindgren gets healthy again, and Adam Fox, obviously. Like, if you can add a fourth guy in Trouba that can play above his average, you got a pretty good blue line. I even forgot to mention Braden Schneider, who's also a dog. I mean, Zach Jones, I know you're a huge Zach Jones fan. Like, this decor, if they can get production from Jacob Trouba, and I'm not asking for a point per game defenseman, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just asking for somebody that doesn't get blown by every other night and isn't a defensive liability, doesn't turn the puck over, what we saw a lot at the end of last year with him, especially in that Florida series. So we're praying for an above average Trouba.
Yeah.
Even if we get an average Trouba, I still think it's a win on the blue line. But in the microcosm of one game, it was really good to see him after all the shit that he had to deal with in the offseason to come out and play a fantastic game to start the year.
Yeah, we can almost kind of take a deep breath where, look, I'm a huge Jacob Trouba hater based on last year. He's realistically not as bad as he was last year. There was something up. Was it injury? Was it just an avalanche? He's not the greatest defenseman in the world, but last year there was something up, specifically like in those series you were talking about. But a question, because you bring him up, is Ryan Lindgren. Like, is he just going to slide in next to Trouba? And
Yes.
and are you comfortable with them getting major like second line defensive pairing, or in a way, do you just set on that Keandre Miller, Adam Fox is the one, and the Zach Jones, Braden Schneider / Lindgren Trouba line, you just ride the hot line during that game?
I've been a huge Ryan Lindgren supporter through all this. I think he gets a bad rap because he doesn't produce offensively, right? Like, and his underlying numbers are not great. I will say that. He's not a great offensive player. His underlying numbers aren't necessarily worth not producing offensively. But at the same time, like, you have a guy that's I'm not going to call him a glue guy because I think that's unfair to him, because he is a good defensive player, but he's the heart and soul of this team. Whether you like him or not, he will block shots. He will get in shooting and passing lanes. He will sacrifice his body, which to a fault is why he's always injured. But he's a guy that is just a warrior. I think it's talked about ad nauseum with him that he is a warrior. And, if he's not playing with a cut under his eye or a half shield on, like, then it's not Ryan Lindgren. If he's not bleeding by the halfway through the first period, it's not a Ryan Lindgren game. But, there are guys that are intangibles to a roster. And obviously none of us are in the locker room. We don't know, we don't know his the vibe in the locker room, but from an outside perspective, he's a guy that seems to keep the team together. Like, he blocks these shots. He is again a warrior on the ice, and I think that's something you can't take away on a team where you have guys like Trouba, you have guys like when Matt Rempe plays, Will Cooley, just shitheads that will run around and hit people and really throw their body on the line. And most teams have those kinds of guys. It's not like the Rangers are special for having a guy like that. Most teams have them. But, I think you lose a lot more with Lindgren not playing and Lindgren not on your team than you do with him on the ice.
And talking about the shitheads, it was nice to see Will Cooley kind of every time Hedl was even like touched. I don't know if that's like something he took up or if like the team has like said something to him and Kakko, but like anytime Hedl was in the middle of anything, and teams are going to take shots at him. It's just like the smart thing to do. Cooley and Kakko were on them, specifically Cooley. Like, nobody was letting them touch Hedl, which was really, really cool to see. And I know we saw a little of it. And again, this was just an unreal performance where everyone played great. But like, I don't think it's been talked about, again, because the Rangers kind of stayed stale this summer, but Keandre Miller and Adam Fox could be like the best defensive pairing in the league. Like, they're that good.
Said it in the postseason last year.
They're that good.
Pairing had such a good, it's such good underlying numbers together in the brief time that they played during the regular season that, with Trouba being a liability at the end of last year, you couldn't really stack your defensive pairing.
No, you couldn't.
But those two together
can
be so dangerous, between the footwork, the finesse, and the IQ of Adam Fox, and the pure speed, reach, and able to defend that Keandre Miller brings. Like, that is a scary pairing. And then it makes your team a lot deeper if you get a good Trouba or an above average Trouba that's playing with Trouba and maybe Schneider. And even if you're playing Lindgren on the bottom pair with Zach Jones, like, Zach Jones is a a poor man's Adam Fox. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but he plays the game at the same like wavelength as Adam Fox. He's a smaller guy. He uses his feet. He pinches to keep pucks in and keep the offense alive. So I don't think, the chemistry might be a little different trying to play with him, but your D-core is so deep. If you have Lindgren and Zach Jones on your bottom pair, or even Trouba and Schneider on your bottom pair, and Keandre Miller playing with Adam Fox. I have been a preacher of that since the end of last year. I will continue to preach that through the start of this year. And I think, we've talked about the D-core a lot. You mentioned that third line. What an awesome game from that third line. From Jackie Redmond yesterday, through the first 50 minutes of the game, the Chytil, Cooley, Kakko line had 12 scoring chances to 3 against, 6 high danger chances to 2 against, 10 shots on goal 10 shots to 3 against, and outscored their opponent 1-0 when they were on the ice. I mean, we talk so heavily about the top 6, and they were good. Lafreniere, a beautiful goal. Trocheck, a garbage time goal, but still a goal. Panarin with an assist. Kreider had 2 goals. Zibanejad, excuse me if I'm wrong, I believe he got on the scoreboard, did he not? Riley Smith, I know, did.
Like I said, might have had an assist. I don't know if he didn't score a goal, but I don't know if he had the assist off.
He was on the board.
Yeah, I think he was on the board. Yeah.
Like I said, excuse me if I'm wrong. Most of my time yesterday was spent watching the Mets. And I'm sure at the end of the show we can allot 5 to 10 minutes to talk about the New York Mets. But if you get your production, and if Chytil can stay healthy, and it's a huge if because he hasn't been through his entire career at no fault to his own. Like I feel like you look at injury prone players as as a liability at points, but there are plenty of guys. He's not at the same level of Crosby, but Crosby early in his career was very injury prone, was able to curb that towards the middle half to end of his career. If he can find a way to stay healthy, stay on the ice, a third line of Cooley, Kakko, and Will Cooley, Chytil, Kakko, and Will Cooley could be the difference in this team, because you get the speed and the physicality of Cooley. You have the puck control, and if Kakko can figure out what to do when he gets the puck in the offensive zone, that'd be fantastic. But if you get the puck control of Kakko and the overall shooting ability of Filip Chytil going for a majority of this season, this is a President's Trophy-esque team again. And I had no doubts that they could and couldn't be. Earlier in the year, before these games started, I said it on our first show or second show that they have no reason to, or the fans have no reason to not believe that this team could win the division again, can win the Eastern Conference, can win the President's Trophy, and can win a Stanley Cup this year. It's the same team that they brought back last year with a piece here and there in Riley Smith and possibly Filip Chytil. We didn't see him a lot. We saw him for 10 games last year, so that is almost an ad, if you want to look at it that way. This is a team that could be super dangerous, and I don't want to overreact to one game, right? Like, you don't want to sit here after game 1 and say this team's going 82-0 and winning the Stanley Cup, even though in our group chat I did mention that they're going 82-0. But when you see a dominant performance like that, and they're going to have their off days, right? Like, they're going to play the Sharks and they're going to play the Blue Jackets that, they might not have their umph in a game in December or whatever. And, I'm going to be mad during those games. We're all going to be pissed off during those games, but, it's not something to overreact to. In the bigger picture, in the grand scheme of things, this is a team that should be, and I have no reason to believe otherwise, that can compete for a Stanley Cup this year.
Filip Chytil is one of, if not the biggest X factor in the entire NHL. For when you talk about teams that are towards the top, teams that have a chance, and people that they've added, Filip Chytil healthy is realistically a 2C, and a pretty damn good 2C. And he started that place with us last year before his injury. But man, as a 3C, he could dominate if he's lined up against other 3Cs. And think about what it just does from like a matchup standpoint. You have Zibanejad, who, regardless of anything you want to say in the past about his offensive game, has always played other top lines at a stalemate. Like always played other top lines at a stalemate. So if you want to throw Mika out there against other top lines, like the best of the best on their team, and come out to stalemates where then you have two lines that can score, because when you add a Heedle to that third line, it could be your secondary scoring line. From a matchup standpoint, you're just not asking anyone to do too much at this point, where because of injuries last year, we really had to rely on that top six and maybe ask people to do things that we didn't want them to do, or extra shift people because we didn't even have enough guys to roll out there some nights, or because Laviolette didn't want to play certain people for more than 5 or 6 minutes. This team is just deep. If you got Philip Heedle 3C, and then you can even do it other ways, where if that line is dominating and that line's playing well, maybe you throw them out there against some top six lines. Maybe you give the Mika line or the Trocheck line some time on the ice against some third lines, and they're just dominating. So what a really solid top 9 versus a top 6 can do for a hockey team throughout 82 games and then 16 more in the playoffs is just incredible. And we didn't get it last year because that injury really debilitated us. And you can just look, winning the center matchup and having good goaltending is normally a good formula in the playoffs. And you're gonna have a hard time convincing me that if Philip Heedle is healthy, there's another team that rolls out guys of the level of Mika, Trocheck, and Heedle. It's just not there. So it's the biggest if maybe in all of hockey, but that's really the only if with him, right? Like, he is good. We know he's good. And does he have scoring drought? Sure. So does everybody. But man, oh man, is he good? Because besides Loff, he's really the only guy on the team with the mentality that can take the puck in our zone, literally just put his head down and skate to the other net and try and stuff it into the back of the net. And, you know, we saw it with Loff last year. It's really nice to have another guy like that. And we saw Heedle do it last night. And even though Cooley, it was a back pass to him, it was Heedle crashing the net. Cooley wasn't even looking to pass. He was looking for a quick back of the stick to front of the stick wrist shot, but it fell back to Heedle, who was doing his thing, and he's always crashing in the net. And a goal happened. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. And if he's healthy for 82 games, 20, 25 goals. If you saw a healthy Philip Heedle getting 30 goals, would anyone be surprised? No. And to add a 30-goal scorer, who else did that this offseason?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, you're expecting a little bit more from Riley Smith than what he got in Pittsburgh at the end of his time there. But I'm glad you brought up Mika Zibanejad, because I had it out on Twitter earlier this week with a couple people. And, you know, you guys saw it. I sent it in the group. Yeah. I'm going to say this. Mika Zibanejad, in the New York Rangers fan base mind, is so criminally underrated. And I've said it before, I'm a Zibanejad apologist. Like, I will fight for this guy until he's not playing for this team anymore. We've got guys comparing him to Rick Nash in the playoffs. You know, this whole thing started with an Aaron Judge thing. You know, obviously Judge has been having a tough postseason, has had some tough postseasons in the past, and we're lumping Mika Zibanejad in as a regular season performer, not a playoff performer. This guy is 6th in in franchise history in points in the postseason. He had a season in 2022 where he was 2nd, I believe, all time in Rangers history in single season postseason point production. Stop. Like, this guy, stop. Like, he is one of the best players of our generation with this franchise. And you're going to sit here and you're going to badmouth him the whole time because he had a bad postseason against the Devils in 1 year, right? Like, his line got shut down against Barkov. Newsflash, everybody got shut down by Barkov last year. Connor McDavid, right, for as good of a postseason as he had, winning the Conn Smythe, despite not winning the Stanley Cup, right, outside of games 4 and 5 in Edmonton, Connor McDavid didn't do anything. You know why? Because Alexander Barkov was on him. Braden Point didn't do much. You know why? Because Alexander Barkov was matched up against him. David Pastrnak didn't do much. Yep. You know why? Because it was Alexander Barkov, right? And we forget that Zibanejad took a brutal cross-check to the lower back, I believe, in the Carolina series. And that really sent him in a bit of a downward spiral towards the end of last season. And obviously everybody plays hurt. Everybody's going through something towards the end of the year. You got to fight through it, as long as it's not a concussion or anything like that. If it's physical pain, a bone bruise, this and that, you can get through it. You got to find a way to get through it. But to sit here and to disrespect what Mika Zibanejad has done for this organization since he's got here in 2016 is foolish. It is downright foolish. I'd love to hear anybody else's comments or opinions in our comment section, whether it be on Twitter, whether it be Instagram, whether it be here in the StreamYard chat. Love to hear your guys' opinions on this, because I truly believe that Zibanejad, in the eyes of Ranger fans, is criminally underrated. He might not be. I've had this discussion with people that I at one point believed he was a top 10 center, top 5 center in the league. Like, I'll pull back on that. I think he's a very good center that this team has, and a very integral piece in this team winning and going and performing at the level that they're expected to this year.
It's funny how like the story has changed so fast with him, where like every Rangers fans, especially the ones who are like hating on him now, were the ones puffing their chests like before, like it was the greatest NHL trade of all time that we traded Brassard for Mika. Now we got this guy Mika, and he's so great. And then, like you said, he hasn't done anything even remotely close to be talked about the way that he is. And then back it up with the fact that what he's done in the past should allow you to give him more of a grace period. That, I don't know, regardless of even what you want to think about him last year and what anyone said about him last year, he's such a player that as soon as the summer came, he should be, a top guy that you're rooting for the Rangers. He's literally someone with me where, look, did I call him out in times last year? Sure. But I'm not going to say a bad word about him until he does something that gives me, something to say about him with this individual season. But Mika Zibanejad has the benefit of the doubt with me. We're going into every season. He's my 1C, and I'm expecting him to play like a 1C. Is he going to? I don't know. I think based on what we've seen, like you've said it a bunch of times and you've literally brought it up. If you look at his entire Rangers career, like it's such an outlier last year. Like, why are you relying on last year versus what, even taking an average of all of his years is way better than what we saw specifically last year. That, I don't know, just an easy guy to root for. Such a Ranger that you want to see perform, and it's almost like people want him to not be good, which is a very weird thing going into a season where he's a guy that to win the Stanley Cup, we need to be a 1C. You can say what you want. We see a lot of people when they release the lineups, why is that Mika line and Kreider line up there, and why is that Trocheck Panarin line, the second line listed? That Mika Kreider line, for whatever you want to say, it's our first line. That most of the times is going up against the other team's best line. So there's no hiding anyone on that line, and they're going to have to be an integral part of this team. And look, we need him to be a 1C to get where we want to go. So as we stand after one game, I'm rooting for him, and I think he's going to do it. And if you're going to speak negative about Mika, you're really speaking negative about the Rangers as a whole, because he's that integral a part of this 2024-2025 team.
Yeah, and not only, I'm glad you mentioned that, he goes up against top lines, right? Like, you know why he does? Because he's a very good defensive forward too. Him and Kreider kill penalties, right? Like, Kreider might not be the greatest defensive forward out there, but when he's out there with Zibanejad, they are, and whoever's on that right wing with them, they are a good defensive top line. And whether you need that out of your top line or not, obviously 29 goals in 82 games last year, 72 points, or 81 games, whatever it was, is not good enough.
They won the President's Trophy with it, like him playing like that. You know what I mean? Like, and if that's his floor, like he's a great player.
If his floor is 30 goals, right? Like you'll take that. If he comes out this year, scores 35, 40 goals even, let's say the high end, he scores 40, and the low end, he scores 32, 33, right? Like that's a productive year. And at the same time, killing penalties. If the penalty kill is on the level that it was at last year, that was so huge, right? Like through the first round of the playoffs, the Rangers penalty kill outscored Washington's power play. Like those are the type of things that win you Stanley Cups, right? Like it's defense wins championships. And if you get the offense without sacrificing your defense, because that's what I think that second line is, right? Like that's a line where you're going to sacrifice defense for offense. Alexi Lafreniere is not a great defensive forward. Artemi Panarin, I will say, is an abysmal defensive forward.
He made that play last night on the Loft goal, but I think it's because he's so bad defensively, the other team didn't expect him to try and make a play.
Yeah. Like every now and then you'll get a play from Panarin defensively, but overall he's a bad defensive forward. Vincent Trocheck is an average to above average defensive forward. So, you'll get your scoring from that line. They'll give up their chances, but very rarely with Zibanejad, Kreider, and now Riley Smith out on the ice, are you going to, give up a ton of grade A opportunities? You aren't sacrificing your defense for offense. But if you can score 30 goals in a season, ideally a little bit more at 5-on-5, but if you score 30 goals in a season and are able to, I don't even want to say shut down a top line, because they're not a shut down defensive line, but they are a very above average defensive forward line. I will take that easily, without hesitation. I will take that. But again, just maybe a little bit more production out of the top line when it comes to offense at 5-on-5 would be nice this year. And again, in saying that, they won a President's Trophy last year with a quote unquote very bad Mika Zibanejad season offensively.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see how many 1Cs on top of the role of just being a 5-on-5 1C are also by far your number one penalty kill line and in that slap shot spot at the point on the power play. Like he's the focus in so many spots that we just need him. We really need him to be that guy. And I think that he's gonna, because again, it wasn't like he scored 10, 15, even 20 goals last year. Like imagine he just scored one more and he was at 30. Like I just feel like those numbers that just like mess with people. Like one more goal and he's at 30. And I think everyone's like, oh, 30 plus goals, that's fine. He was a little off last year. If you think it's bad, you're just a hater. And if you think he's going to turn back into what he was last year, for some reason you're not giving the benefit of the doubt to a guy who's done so much for us. And think about some of the moments even last year, like the Stadium Series when he had a quote-unquote down year. He's always been like the guy in those moments. So I'm all in on Mika this year. What I saw yesterday, even at 5-on-5, it looked good last year. It looked good. We're going to see them integrate Riley Smith a little bit more, but it seems like they were free-flowing a little bit more 5-on-5, worrying about playing defense, which we saw them kind of hunker down almost last year and fall into that, okay, if we can't contribute anything offensively, we're sure as hell not going to let anyone else contribute a little more. And we seemed like Mika was almost a little bit more free-flowing with that and willing to join the rush and not willing to be like, oh, I got to make sure to get back and mark my guy because I'm playing a Sidney Crosby or someone like that. And even with that increased offensive activity last night, I'm pretty sure I saw the stat that Sidney Crosby only had 2 shots on goal last night. And that's a top 5 player of all time who, he's not in his prime, but he was sure as hell still good last year and sure as shit always kills the Rangers when he's on the ice. So to limit him to 2 shots on goal and to dominate the 5-on-5 play, when you look at the expected goals in Corsi, what are you going to say other than good game from that first line and good game from every line? And to go back to something that you touched on way before, just because it popped back into my brain, Adam Fox and Keandre Miller. Think about the fact that Adam Fox was so good at moving the puck with really 3 only outlets because as good as Ryan Lindgren is, like we know what he is. He's strictly a defensive defenseman, and he's giving Adam Fox nothing from an offensive breakout standpoint. It's like giving a great quarterback a great receiver. And when you talk about Keandre Miller, he can receive the puck as good as forwards can. And then you talk about the matchup, he's almost like a great tight end where you got guys that aren't defensemen that have to play defense against him. And it could be otherworldly what we can see from Adam Fox. And I wonder how intricate and almost cool they get with it, with things they can run with releasing Keandre Miller. We saw a little bit of it last night, but just seeing Fox give it to Miller at full speed and him able to take it into the zone at times last night is really giving the best puck moving defenseman another outlet that he's never had in the past. And what it can contribute on the offensive zone, as well as them providing pressure means they have to defend less. So in the defensive zone, it helps them. I just keep going back to the fact that I think that's going to be the best defensive pairing in all of hockey when you talk about how they work together, how they can play offense and defense, and what they're going to be tasked to do. And, we keep saying it's one night, but there's a lot of things that make sense. And maybe it wasn't an aberration, and maybe these things are going to work. And if they do, boy, oh boy, they're going to be scary because, like you said, those nights against the Sharks when they're off, or those nights against the Columbus Blue Jackets when they're off, if that guy between the net is on, we're still going to win those games. So now there's so many ways for this team to beat you if they're clicking 5-on-5 that you're going to need a hell of an off night to beat them, because if they're bad on 5-on-5, we still have the power play. If they're bad on the power play, we still have the penalty kill, so we're not going to give up many power play goals. And if all three of those things are going wrong and we can only scrape a deflection goal or two, we still got that guy between the pipes that's a sure thing as there is in the NHL at this point. So that 5-on-5 game opening, that ability to roll out a top 9 with Philip Hedl, plus a bottom line that scored our first goal last night, you got to hope for a really, really off night for 2 or 3 aspects of the Rangers to really get a chance to beat them, and that's a dangerous team.
Yeah, if you took Sam Carrick, first goal scorer last night,
you won a lot of money.
I was gonna say, I'm sure you won a lot.
And you were all pissed when they said that it was Trouba, but then we're excited when they changed it to Carrick.
All right, Ranger wise, what do you think? We've talked about everything that could be talked about at the moment.
Yeah, let's talk some Mets.
All right, let's get into the Mets. Obviously, first of all, Brennan's not here, so we can do this. I know the Yankees play in like 20 minutes or something like that. They play at 7, looking to close out the Kansas City Royals. I don't know if anybody wants to talk Mets or even Yankees. I know a little bit less about the Yankees than I do the Mets, but if you want to talk Mets and Yankees, feel free in the chat. We will happily answer questions, field any questions. Have you loved the team as much as you've loved this New York Mets team this year?
No, I mean, and really it's David Stearns. Like, what a GM David Stearns is, where he really does understand like what it takes to win and like roster construction from a postseason standpoint. Like, I'm looking at other teams that, let's talk about rotation. Like 50% of their, maybe even higher, more than 50% of their rotation money is with an ace who in a 5-game series you maybe see once, and then game 5 if you get there. The Mets are just throwing these $15 million arms that are like really good number 2 guys or fantastic number 3 guys that are just giving length. Like the Dodgers had to throw a bullpen game when they have the highest paid roster of all time, and we're throwing Jose Quintana in a game 4, who for most other playoff teams, he'd be probably pitching game 2 for them. So yeah, maybe, I mean, now we have Senga back, so let's change the conversation a little bit. But before Senga came back, maybe we didn't have the arm to match other teams, in game 1. But every other game, we have the advantage. Plus, we were throwing a guy in game 1 with, before Senga came back, a Manaea or a Sevy who could go up against an ace of another team. But now, realistically, we're going to throw Senga for 60 or 7 pitches in game 1. And then, I mean, no matter who we play, who's going to beat a Sevy, Manaea, Quintana, 2, 3, 4, and with Senga coming back, Peterson's now in the bullpen, and we all know how important that guy is in the postseason that can throw 2 or 3 innings. And now you have Peterson plus Budo, who I know he hasn't looked great maybe in 1 or 2 appearances in the postseason, but this team is built to win in the playoffs. If we can get a little bit more power in the next series, because I do think we have to score some more runs. And, we have gotten the timely hits, so I'm not going to say anything about that. But, you got to hit the long ball in baseball today. And I think maybe getting a little power, maybe from a Tyrone Taylor or a Francisco Alvarez, and having 1 or 2 of our big boys show up, it could be magical. My prediction, and then I'll pass it off to you, is that Brandon Nimmo has a Daniel Murphy like playoffs the rest of the way, where if someone's just going to hit like 3 or 4 home runs in the next series, I really think it's going to be him. I think they pitched some guys in this Philly series, specifically Ranger Suarez, that they were able to match up well against him. I think he's going to go off in the next round.
Yeah, I've been guilty as a Ranger fan basically since I've have very much gotten into sports. I mean, I've always been into sports, but like seriously, like watching games, started watching probably in high school, like freshman year of high school. And for me, that was the year that the Rangers went to the Stanley Cup in 2014. 2015, obviously they win the Eastern Conference. They win the President's Trophy, get to the conference finals. 2016, take a step back. 2017, take a half step forward when they get past Montreal. And then obviously the run that they're on at the moment where you go to the conference final in 2022, you lose to the Devils, but still make the playoffs in 23, go to the conference final again in 2024. I almost felt like I lost the enjoyment, right, of a team. Like I'm sitting here like, you're expected to do this. This is what the expectation.
Being a Yankee fan, I have Yankee fans, friends that don't watch the regular season because they're 90 games in the playoffs. I'll see you in September. And until last year, they're realistically right. So what you're saying about the Rangers makes complete sense. Like you're expected to be in the playoffs. And we were.
The Mets at the moment have made me thoroughly enjoy watching a sporting event. And don't get me wrong, like in the moment, like I'm still tense and angry when Diaz couldn't throw a strike and all that. But
I was screaming at my wife yesterday when Diaz couldn't throw. After those first two guys take him out. Yep. Take him. He shouldn't have even been in. Because I'll let you go. I'm sorry.
No, it's just the core of this team, right? Like Francisco Lindor is such a likable human being. Brandon Nimmo is such a likable person. Pete Alonso, if he wasn't, I've had this conversation with a ton of people, and my opinion on Pete, like probably most Mets fans, has changed because he's been able to sort of right his biggest wrong of, he was a great producer in the regular season, but 2022 came around, didn't really produce when he mattered down the stretch. Down the stretch this year, didn't do anything until the home run against Devin Williams, and then turned into this guy that has been able to hit in clutch situations, what he hasn't done in the past. But I've talked to people in the past about Pete Alonso. I was like, listen, be honest with me. If he wasn't a Met, would you call him this corny dork and all that stuff? And everybody basically was like, no, it's because he's a Met.
Yeah.
If he was a Cleveland Guardian, everybody would be backing him. But, he's a likable guy to some extent. Jose Iglesias, like that guy, I don't care how he stays in the organization, whether it's him playing again next year, if it's him as a coach in management, whatever, like he needs to be a part of this organization. Like Francisco Alvarez is like this ball of energy, whether he's hitting or not hitting. Sean Manaea, unbelievable team guy on top of the fact that he's been able to throw incredible innings when he's out there. Like it sounds so dumb, but like the vibe of the team is so positive that you forget, I've never had the confidence in a situation where your team is down or it's a tie game late in the game where you're like,
never fear.
Like they're still going to win this game. Like even game 2 against Philadelphia, they lost, whatever. But a bunch of my friends, we talked about it after the game. Like you made Philadelphia gut every second of every pitch of their 2 home games to get a single win on a walk-off in the bottom of the 9th inning. Like you made it so miserable for them, and then you put them away at home. Like that is a team that is a situation I've never seen a Mets team do in the past. Like I've never seen teams that I root for, like even the Rangers from time to time, like they don't have, and granted last year they come back against Carolina in game 6, but the Mets team just has like this swagger about them that like as long as there's an out remaining, like I don't care if it's 8-0, 9-0, 10-0, like we're still in this game somehow.
Yeah, I'm so there with you, man. Like I'm just the Phillies score yesterday. I'm like, okay, we're gonna win. Like we're gonna win until like the last out is made. Like we're gonna win. And obviously, if it's 10-0, maybe like that will change. But like we've never been in that game yet because we just have dogs at the plate. that just bear down like every single at bat. And as much as, I talked about we need the long ball more, like you still need to be able to grind out at bats throughout a game, especially big at bats. And it's like everybody, like Marte, Iglesias, even Pete, obviously Lindor, Winker, JD Mart. It's like every single person I'm expecting to get a hit, and I'm disappointed in them when they get out. And I mean that as a positive. Like when Iglesias yesterday was like swinging at some pitches out of the zone, I was like shocked. Like when he came up with bases loaded, 1 out yesterday in the first, I'm like 2-0. He's gonna hit the ball up the middle. Like we know exactly. And then he looked stupid. And like, don't even get me started on the Ranger Suarez curveball in the dirt that we couldn't lay off for the first 3 innings. But yeah, this team, you just expect something good to happen, and you don't know when, and you don't know who, and you don't know how. But man, oh man, I'm never down on them. And it's crazy that we're getting better because Senga's one of the best pitchers in the league. And probably for next game, we're going to have him at 65, maybe 70 pitches. So if he can give you 3 or 4, like a perfect scenario is Senga for 3. A perfect scenario with 65 pitches, Senga for 4, Peterson for 4, Diaz. And that's like the perfect scenario for that. And I feel great right now, but they said it on the radio today. The expectations have changed now for the Mets, and I agree with it, where we're so close. We got to win the World Series now. Like we got to. Did my mic go off? Yeah, especially because we are 100% vibes, and I'm with you. Like that's what's carrying us. But I don't want people to also look down on the Mets. Like we're also not a good. Like this team is really good. This if it's the Dodgers and it's us and it's the Yankees and if it's the Gardos, we're just as good as them. Did we just get into the playoffs on the last day? Sure. But if you go back to June 1st, which is just take out 2 of the 6-7 months of baseball, we've been the best team in baseball. So we're playing right as we're currently constructed. We are the best team in baseball, and we need to move forward with that assumption. That I don't care if Vegas comes out that the Dodgers are minus 190 again. The Mets right now are the best team in baseball, and we need to win the World Series. As much as this is a great run, and I'm happy to be here. If we lose, it's gonna look like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, anybody just joining this stream, right, is sitting here like this is a Rangers podcast. Like, what the hell are we doing talking about the Mets? Trust me, listen, the first 45 minutes of this episode, I promise you, anything Rangers that you want.
We never get this. The Rangers have made the playoffs in this century more than the Mets have made it their entire. My friends were like, 11 years sounds crazy, and I didn't even believe it at first, but it's only been 11 times in the playoffs. Yeah, it's so sad. It's so sad, but I'm so happy.
Let's tie this in to the Rangers really quickly. Neat little stat. Outside of 2016, when the Mets made the wild card, and if you want to count that as the postseason or not, but since 2015, every time the Rangers have made the conference final, the New York Mets have made the playoffs. And in every year the Rangers don't make the conference final, the Mets do not make the playoffs. So we should have seen this coming.
We should have live bet them. I mean, I did
in May when they were bad.
I took them. It's not a gambling stream, and I'll never promote gambling, but
because I'm so bad at it, I will definitely not promote gambling.
I took the Mets when they were 11 games back in the wild card to make the playoffs, so I cashed out on that. I took them in the 9th inning. When Devin Williams came to the mound, the Mets were plus 990 to win that game. Took them against the Phillies in game 1. It's just incredible what's going on with them right now. And I guess why I'm saying that is because if the Rangers make the conference finals again this year, no matter what, where the Mets could have 0 wins at that point. We're betting them to make the playoffs because I guess that's kind of what just happens.
If you're a smarter man, unlike myself, that I'm going to admit it, and I admitted it on this show, that I am a bet against my team guy, the worst guy you can ever imagine. The amount of money that you could have made this year live betting, and not even live betting, but just betting the Rangers because they were an underdog in outside of the Washington series, every game that they played. They were an underdog in every game that they played from the Washington series on. And if you live bet the Mets at any point during this run, or even, they're not favorites. They were favorites last night. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was the first time they were a favorite going into a game, which is crazy.
Yeah, and the line didn't even open them as favored. They were a bet to favorite. So even when the line opened, Vegas had Phillies minus 115 and Mets 105 when it opened.
Yeah.
No respect.
When I took my Phillies bet yesterday, the Phillies were at plus 105. So
that's what it ended at.
It was,
will you put a big bet like on the Padres and Dodgers to like win the series?
No, I don't do the series. I do individual games. Which is probably stupid, but I do individual games, and especially so I'll put something down when the game starts or before the game starts, and then in the instance where I actually won like $30 off game 2 because when the Mets went up 3-0, I was like, all right, let's I'll throw another 10 and just to see if I could solidify this if it means my team wins. Obviously, that didn't work. They won, but Mets go up 4-1 yesterday on the Lindor Grand Slam. Immediately throw $15 on the Phillies, and none of it ended up hitting, so I didn't win anything. But for my own sanity and my own peace of mind, I'm such a bad gambler. And I always pick the wrong teams that in my mind, picking the Phillies, putting my monetary value down on the Phillies is the world saying, oh, he thinks the Phillies are going to win. Watch this.
I've been just sitting there on FanDuel during these Mets games, not taking all the lines, but watching the lines move in playoff baseball is absolutely absurd.
We said it in hockey. We said it in hockey at the end of the year too.
Crazy, but in baseball, there was one Brandon Nimmo at bat last night where the Mets were, it was either game 2 or game 3, where when Brandon Nimmo with no outs came up to bat because I think there was 2 men on, the Mets were minus 190. He struck out and the Mets fell to minus 120, and then the next guy out and they were underdogs, and then the Mets scored a run and they were if you can track these lines, there's a way where you can get both teams at plus 130, and it doesn't matter. And I'm sure there's smarter guys than me out there doing that. But through all these games when the live line shift like crazy, both teams are underdogs throughout the game at certain points where you just put the same unit on both of them and you're just up automatic money. And it's just crazy how these lines move. And yeah, back to hockey, we saw it. I was sitting there. I was actually pissed last year because I was watching the Hurricanes game 6. And I was going to put in a bet because it was 0-0 going into the end of that first period. And FanDuel had 1-0 Hurricanes 5 seconds before it happened on TV because obviously they got to get the live lines live. And the line shifted from even to the Hurricanes minus 250. So just how it's, gambling just shows you how much of a momentum sport, momentum thing sports is. It's just from one extreme all the way to the next.
Yeah, and if you track it, religiously, you could win a lot of money off that.
One of my friend's brothers does that, and he's obsessed with it, and he comes out of these games where it doesn't matter what happens, some way, and obviously and he even says it himself, you got to be sick, you're sitting there with your phone, 2 phones open, 2 screens open, because you don't know if you're getting it on FanDuel or DraftKings or Fliff. He's talking about all these things, but. Yeah, sometimes you're doing it to scrape $5, but I guess, if you have a method and you're doing it for every game, it adds up. But no, it's just another fun thing about sports gambling. And yeah, we don't promote it or do it much because we both suck. But yeah, betting Rangers live was a lot of fun during the playoffs, and I know a lot of people did it.
Just to wrap up this episode, my buddy, speaking of gambling, took the Canucks to win the opening face-off of overtime last night. That's where we're at, where you're betting face-offs as they happen.
That's crazy. And
I think he won it too. I have to check with him because we were talking as it happened, and they never paid him out when I was talking to him because they won the draw, but it was a tie-up, and Vancouver ended up, or Calgary, I think, ended up with possession, but they won the draw. So I don't know if he got paid out for it, but
and Canucks. And talking about Canucks, I guess we can wrap up with this because it talks about the Rangers as well. I don't know if you saw this, but Amazon's releasing that Game 7 series where the Rangers and Canucks are going to be one of them. So I know as a Rangers fan, since it's the last time we've won, everyone knows like ad nauseum what happened during that game. But truthfully, whenever these things come out, there'll probably be one or two tidbits that we'll find cool. And look, obviously, I'm going to watch it. Even if the Rangers weren't in it, I mean, Game 7s are just sick. I was going to watch something like that. But yeah, it's probably going to be a lot of Messier talking about that game and stuff we've seen before. But yeah, an interesting thing where, the Rangers will be in that Game 7.
I'm so tired of talking about the 94 Rangers.
We just want something else. Let's talk about the 2027. I mean, the 2025 Games 7 that we win this year, right?
Yep. I'm so over the 94 Rangers. Like, whatever.
It's sad that we got to go back to 90. Like, it's at some point, it's sad when you're celebrating teams that were so long ago. And look, I'm doing it with the Knicks also. Do it with the Mets. It's like I need one of these teams to win at some point.
Yep. We will see. Next episode, I believe.
We got to do the one thing that me and Brendan made a thing last year. Let me bring up the Rangers schedule. So next week we'll be here on Thursday. Let me see how many games the Rangers play between now and Thursday. They play Utah. They play the Red Wings. And then a second game against the Red Wings after our episode. So there's only 2 games at home, the Utah Hockey Club and the Red Wings before our next episode. What's the Rangers record going to be when we go live next week?
They play Utah, Detroit, and who?
No, just Utah and Detroit.
Just Utah and Detroit.
Yeah, at home.
I'll give it a 1. I'll give it 1-1. I don't think they start the year 3-0. I think they beat Utah in their home opener. Might drop to Detroit. I think Detroit's going to be a very good team this year. Obviously, they didn't start well last year. They didn't finish well. They had a good middle of the year. But let's say 1-1. I'll give them the game against Utah. Good for them getting their first win of their existence against Chicago.
Yeah.
The Rangers are a much different team than Chicago is. And I'll take Detroit to win that other game.
I'm going to go 2-0, and the reason I'm going to say 2-0 is I'm going to say we're going to split the goalies, and Igor is going to get the home opener against Utah, win that game. And then, I want to give Mr. Quick his props because I was so out on him last year until he literally,
as everyone was,
smacked me in the face with good performance. My first question was, how long of a leash are we going to have on him before we cut him? I think he's going to play well this year. Again, I think he'll do well against the Red Wings. So I got 2-0, and I got the Rangers being 3-0. You got the Rangers being 2-1 coming into next week. So we'll see how they do.
Let's say 2-0.
Okay, 2-0-1. I like that. So some points coming to the Rangers from both of us. But no, a good episode, a weird episode with the Rangers because it was one game. And it was too good that we were like, what can we say? Because we know
complain about anything.
Yeah, and we know they're not going to be that good. So maybe a 1-1 or 1-0 in 1 week wouldn't be the end of the world to talk about the Rangers next week. Because if it's 6-0, 6-0 again, we're going to be sitting here on Thursday with Brendan just smiling and probably talking Mets and Yankees again.
Yeah, hopefully we're talking Mets. Hopefully we're talking Yankees by the time the next episode comes out, because it means both teams are still playing, both teams are still in it. Hopefully we're talking Mets-Yankees World Series at the end of October and the beginning of November. But for right now, that'll do it for us. Thank you very much for joining us. Whoever did join, whoever stayed for 30 seconds, 2 seconds, the entire stream, thank you very much. We're back here next Thursday, 6 o'clock. Actually, it'll be TBD depending on,
I think the Rangers have an 7:30 game on Thursday. So we'll try and work it around that game, maybe a pregame or something like that.
Yep. I know Mets and if the Yankees move on, I think the Mets play Thursday. Probably the Yankees will play Thursday as well if they move on. So TBD on the start time. Might be a little bit earlier, just so everybody can watch their teams and be able to fully hopefully enjoy 3 wins that night. But it will be Thursday. So until then, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. We will see you next week.